Hey, Ag Teacher Thoughts here. It's another cloudy day here in northern Idaho. It is raining today, which is kind of unusual for us. This time of year, we'd most likely be expecting snow. It's like 40 some degrees. Um, anyway, so I'm up here on a Sunday doing some more work. I came up here to water our plants. The petunias and verbena are just about ready to go into the baskets, so I'll be shooting another video about that soon to kind of let you know where we're at and kind of show that process. One of the things I wanted to cover is I recently got a video about career in tech. It was for career in tech instructors, basically encouraging us to talk to folks and tell them why we went into career in tech. I've mentioned before that I was in nursery work, but in between a lot of my nursery work and right before I went into school, I was a CNC machinist. I worked at a large CNC manufacturing facility, actually technically making medical equipment. It was actually medical equipment for the dental industry, but I spent 10 years of my life making dental equipment. So the reason I kind of bring that up is that's really kind of the genesis of why I became a CTE teacher. So when I was a machinist, I'm one of those kind of people that when I do something like when I was a machinist, my whole goal is to become the expert in anything that I do. So while I was there, I learned everything there was to learn about machining. I talked to the old guys, I did research, I watched YouTube, I read websites, I did a lot of work. I took courses, but I did a lot of work to really understand machining and manufacturing. And at the factory, I did everything from coating and plating in one department, did CNC milling on all sorts of milling machines, verticals, horizontals, robot assisted, pallet changers, standalones. So I've done a lot of CNC machining. And being as I took the time to learn everything there was to know, and I kind of had a knack at teaching, it wasn't long before I was tapped to be the shift trainer. Okay, so that means when new guys came on shift, they would partner them up with another machinist, and it was your job as the trainer to train that person how to completely do their job, right? How to run the machine, how to check the parts, how to use the tools. And that was my job. In addition to that, I was supposed to be running my own machine, but I would spend, depending on the guy, anywhere from 3 to 6 months training them. The first month solid, I was shoulder to shoulder with that person the entire day. Like I would step out to run my machine or they'd come alongside and learn my machine. But it was one-on-one, 100% interaction all day long on training. And one of the things I learned training new people into the shop is the school systems have really kind of gotten relaxed on teaching technical skills. A lot of students, with the big push for STEM, the science, technology, engineering, and math, a lot of schools did away with their career and tech departments. The school I went to over in Oregon, the one I went to high school at, just a few years after I was there, they physically bulldozed the career and tech wing and turned it into a STEM wing. So we had generations going through the school system with no experience with swinging a hammer, running a welder, building a house, turning a wrench to fix a car. They just took all of that out of the school system. And when I was in manufacturing, I was seeing the results of that. I'd have people that would come in that they'd never run a drill press before, they'd never seen a CNC before, they've never made anything, they've never turned wrenches. And this went on for a few years until finally I moved out of the CNC milling and I went down to a sheet metal department. And there we had all sorts of machines. I was running the robotic welder. Yeah, I ran a welder that was operated by a robot, so the robot did all the welding and I would check everything and clean all the parts up. But as a part of that, I was also tapped with helping out other new people to the shop. And really my change into full-on education came when I was working with a gentleman who was fresh out of high school. He was 18, 19, somewhere in that range. And he'd been hired on to run our laser punch cell. Okay, so this is machines that cut steel with lasers, but then they use a tool to poke holes of different shapes into the steel. So it's a laser punch. With that machine, it cost the company $1 million to put it in, right? It's $1 million machine. And this young person that they'd hired to train up to run that machine, when he came in his first night, they had an issue with some parts. There was a hole called a racking hole. It's basically where we hang something from before we painted it. And the punch had broken and it didn't punch the holes in the part. So in order for us to have the parts painted, we had to send them to another department. And over there, they needed something to hang it on little wires with, and it's that racking hole. Well, when he came on shift, his first job was, here's a cordless drill, here's a drill, well, cordless drill motor, if you're a machinist, you understand, and here's a drill. That's what goes into the cordless drill motor. But you'd call it a drill bit. So anyway, he was handed a cordless drill and a drill bit and says, hey, right here in this corner, drill a hole. And he's like, okay, how do I do that? And me and another gentleman that was there, who's actually our floor supervisor, looks at him. I look at my supervisor. My supervisor looks back at me and he's like, what do you mean? How do you do that? Just drill a hole. Well, it's when we learned that the young gentleman that they'd hired had never picked up a cordless drill before. Never picked up a corded drill, never used a drill press, never used a bench grinder, never drilled a hole in anything, and hadn't actually used screwdrivers, like hand screwdrivers. And for me, that was kind of the straw that broke the camel's back. I realized that this young person had gone all the way through school, never had a trade course, never picked up a tool, never made anything, never drilled a hole in anything, and he had just been hired on to run a $1 million machine that requires some technical aptitude. So in my mind that moment, I like mentally quit. Now, it's not like the quiet quit. It was more the quit of, I don't want to have to train anybody anymore. It's stupid to do it one at a time, right? It just doesn't make sense. So you've got a person that's reducing their production to train a new person to run a machine who's gonna may or may not stick with that machine for a year. You know, sometimes they just walked out the door and never came back. And I realized it was like, you know, the whole problem is that he went through high school and never learned it. You know, if I step out of the machine shop and I go into schools and I teach trade work, I can trade them 5 at a time, 10 at a time, 15 at a time. Don't make me train them 20 at a time in a class, because in a shop that's really kind of hard to do, although it happens. But the idea was I could train them by the dozens and send them into manufacturing, and then manufacturing would get employees that were ready to learn things. They'd know how to read a tape measure. They'd know how to use a cordless drill. They'd know how to use a drill press. They'd know how to use a hammer. All of my students learn how to read calipers and micrometers. But they would come to the school with technical knowledge and skills, and they'd know whether or not they wanted to do trade work. And I thought, great, you know, that's what I want to do. So I worked real hard to figure out how to do that. I worked with a university back in Oregon that trains people how to be teachers in the classroom. So I was looking for trade work, so I was looking for vocational agriculture education. And so I talked to the folks down in that department, and they accepted me to their programs. It's great, we'll run you through that. And then I started running into roadblocks and snags. Schools not wanting me to be a student teacher because I was old. Yeah, old. I was in my 40s, and they kind of saw me as old. So long story short, the director of the ag ed department came to me and was like, you know, really, man, we appreciate that you want to come get trained to do this, but we really think you should just go. I'm like, what do you mean just go? They're like, go work at a school now. Don't go through the training program. I already had a bachelor's. I already have a master's. They're in an unrelated field, but they are technically education style degrees, just subjects that are unrelated to ag. I was in one point in time a minister, so that's what my degrees were in. But they told me, they're like, we're going to kick you out of the program, and we want you to go teach in a school like right now. And they said, we've got a school that the person they hired turned down the position. It's 2 weeks before school starts. And this was right near the end of the week. They're like, get a hold of them, start the discussions. We think you'd be a good fit. Go there. So I went home, and the weekend rolled through, and I was kind of feeling down on myself. And then about midweek, I get a phone call, and it's a school calling me. And they're like, hey, yeah, we'd like you to come down and take a look at our school. Tell us what you think. And we want you to be our ag teacher. So I go down and I take a tour of the school. But it really didn't feel like a tour. It felt more like an onboarding. Like, we're giving you the tour of where you're going to work, not we're here to interview you. But anyway, after that weird experience of a tour, I went home. They called me back on a Friday. It was like a day later, and we start negotiating. And they offered me a starting teacher salary. A guy in his 40s being offered a starting teacher salary. I was like, no, man, I'm making more in the factory. I can't take your position. So we went back and forth, and every time we went back and forth, the offer got higher and higher and higher until he kind of stopped. He says, hey, man, what's your crazy number? And I kind of looked at my wife and turned back to the phone, and I give him a dollar figure. And he didn't say no. And it was that sudden realization of, holy cow, man, they didn't say no. This is a possibility. And the crazy number I gave him was a pay raise over what I was earning as a machinist. It was a significant pay raise. It was pretty much, I gave him an offer that I myself couldn't refuse, and they didn't say no. They turned around and went back to the school board, chatted a little bit, and they hired me. And I went from, on a Friday, being a machinist, to on the following Monday, I was sitting in a classroom. And I remember I had one day before students came in. Yeah, it's pretty much one day. So when I went to school that Monday to work, I had never taught in a classroom. Kind of like the people that kicked me into trade work. I'd never done it before. Never taught in a classroom. Never done classroom discipline. Never run a grade book. And I went from working on a machine by myself and training one person at a time to suddenly, hey, by the way, you're going to teach ag mechanics automotive classes. I'm not a car guy. Give me a milling machine and a chunk of metal. Give me a print and some measuring tools. I will make anything you want to go in a car. Just don't ask me to fix the car. That's kind of where I was at. But I remember sitting in the middle of my classroom and starting to feel faint and feeling like I was going to vomit, realizing I had no idea what I was doing. That they just gave me keys to the kingdom and nobody helped me out. So that was my experience. That's how I got into teaching. It was basically, I said, hey, teaching sounds interesting. And the industry said, great, here's a classroom. There was no preparation for that. Would I recommend anybody do it like that? Try to avoid it, because that's a hard switch. You're not gonna enjoy that. So really that's how I got into ag teaching. I have a lot more theories and things that I discuss about it, but those of you that find this want to know how in the world I got here, that's it. You know, I got tired of teaching young people one at a time in a machine shop, decided to do it in the school, and the school said okay. So this is I think this is year 6 for me in a classroom. So it's been quite a challenge. I do enjoy it. It has its good times, it has its bad times, but overall it's been a good experience, a good life change, and I feel that I'm making a difference. But if you are thinking this is something for you, hey, go ahead, give it a try. You know, the worst they can say is no, you need a little preparation, or it may not be right for you, but you know, go ahead and give it a try. It's an experience. So yeah, hey, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next video. See ya.